City of Groton Planning and Zoning Commission to order. In terms of attendees, we have Ms. Bergeron, myself, Paul Kunkemoller. We have Mr. Streeter, Mr. Rose, and Mrs. Streeter. The first item on our agenda is approval of the March 19th, 2019 meeting minutes. Has everybody had a chance to review the minutes?
I make a motion to accept the minutes as presented.
I'll second it.
All right. Motion's been made and seconded. Are there any changes, any questions or comments on the minutes? All right, hearing none. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? All right, so the minutes are approved 4-0-1. All right, public communications. None. Old business. 213 Bridge Street Professional Office Suite.
The applicant has requested a 65-day extension. That would bring us into the May regular meeting. They are still working to address staff comments.
All right, so no action by the commission tonight. All right, next item on the agenda is the public hearing. So I would like to open the public hearing for special permit number 461, site plan number 469, and CSP number 314, 75 Eastern Point Road, electric boat, South Yard Assembly Building. The purpose of this public hearing is for the commission to receive input from the applicant, proponents, opponents, and all interested parties or citizens who wish to comment on the aforementioned application. It is important to note that once this application was received by the commission, no member of the commission may comment on or discuss this application with any other member of the commission, the applicant or the applicant's agent, member of the public or interested party, except during the public hearing proceedings. Once the hearing is closed, commission members may only discuss this application with commission members during deliberations. This hearing is being recorded and meeting minutes are being documented. Anyone wishing to speak shall do so from the podium. Please state your name clearly, spelling your last name for the record, and provide your address. Please speak slowly into the microphone and reintroduce yourself each time you speak. The commission uses the following procedure during public hearings. Each hearing will be introduced and the legal notice read. The applicant or designated agent will present the application. The commission and staff will have the opportunity to ask questions or provide comments. The applicant will then have the opportunity to address staff and commission questions and comments. The chairman will then ask for public comments in the following order: comments in favor of the application, comments in opposition to the application, comments that are neither in favor or opposition of the application. Any questions to the applicant, staff, or commission shall be addressed through the chairman. The chairman will pose the question or questions to the appropriate party or parties. Please limit public comments to how the application does or does not comply with land use regulations or the plan of conservation and development. The applicant will then have the opportunity to address public comments and questions. The commission and staff will be provided further opportunity to ask additional questions and offer further comments. These may be directed to the applicant or a member of the public who previously commented or submitted information for the record. The applicant and members of the public will have one opportunity to respond to the commission and staff questions or comments. The commission will then decide whether to close or continue the public hearing to a future date. Once the hearing is closed, the commission is unable to hear additional comments or accept exhibits or correspondence in favor, opposition, or with a neutral position on the application. The commission will then deliberate upon the application. Deliberations will occur during a meeting of the Planning and Zoning Commission. Deliberations will be posted on a meeting agenda, and the public is welcome to listen to the commission's discussions. Agendas are posted a minimum of 24 hours in advance of a regular or special meeting of the commission and are provided on the city's website and at the city clerk's office. During deliberations, commission members will discuss the application with input from staff. The commission will take into consideration relevant testimony and information provided by the applicant and members of the public. Following deliberations, the commission will then vote on the application. Vote outcomes could be to approve, approve with conditions, deny, or deny with prejudice. Are there any questions regarding these procedures before I open the public hearing?
No, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. For the record, can staff please read the legal notice and provide the dates of publication?
The following was published on March 28th, 2019, and April 4th, 2019 in the Day newspaper. Notice is hereby given that a public hearing will be held on Tuesday, April 9th, 2019, 6:30 p.m., City Council Chambers, 295 Meridian Street, Groton, Connecticut, to consider the following. One, special permit for the following sections of the City of Groton zoning regulations: 4.4.E, 7.6.C.2, 7.6.C.5, 7.6.D.3, 7.7.D, associated with 7.7.C1, items A, B, and C, inclusive electric boat corporation applicant. Application materials are available for inspection at the planning offices, 295 Meridian Street, Groton, Connecticut, dated this 13th day of March, Groton, Connecticut, Paul Miller, Chair.
All right. Do you have some exhibits that?
I'm going to go through the exhibit list of what is on file. All of the exhibits, too, are available on the commission's website as well, if anybody's interested. I'm not going to read the exhibit numbers and the dates. I'm just going to go through the exhibits themselves. So we have the application materials in the various forms, Forms 1, as well as Forms A, B, and C. We have the General Dynamics Electric Boat, South-Yard Assembly Building Permit drawings. There's a total of 83 pages of drawings in that one set. A traffic impact statement for the assembly building by Fussin O'Neill. General Dynamics Electric Boat, South-Yard Assembly Building, Stormwater Management Report by Fussin O'Neill. Preliminary Geotechnical Report, South-Yard Development by GEI. The CD, DVD of the above noted materials. The contract between the City of Groton and DL companies for their technical review services to assist staff and the commission. Staff review sheets referring the application to various departments within the city. Staff comments from the fire department, Parks and Rec. Correspondence from the city to DEEP as a referral as required under the statutes. The draft zoning board of appeals meeting minutes for variances that had been received. Staff review comments dated March 13th, 2019. Notice sent to the town of Groton town clerk's office noting that this application was filed. And I'd like to just note that the town clerk in the town of Groton had also forwarded that notice on to the planning commission in the town, and they have requested that the applicant be present at their next meeting, I think it's at the 23rd, to present. So that will take place. We have comments from Groton Utilities, additional staff review comments, the Connecticut Deep referral response, which I'll read into the record in a moment as they requested. Storm drainage pipe revisions reviewed by DL companies, assembly building cross sections, legal notices, additional staff review comments, correspondence to DEEP regarding the referral letter, which I'll explain in a moment. City planner staff report to the commission, which we received at the last meeting. DEEP letter regarding CAM versus Ray visual impacts. Additional staff comments, number 5. Email correspondence between D. Godier and M. Lewis Gray construction sequence. Public hearing sign picture. And draft meeting minutes from the Conservation Commission where the applicant received approval from the Wetlands Commission at the last meeting. And the rest are additional responses to our comments from the applicant. There's another list of about a half a dozen items here. I'm not going to, I don't think extensively read them into the record, and I do have the mail receipts as well for the certified mailings that had run out. There's additional exhibits that haven't been logged in but that were submitted tonight, including the presentation. I will read into the record each correspondence. This is dated March 11, 2019. Addressed to Chairman Paul Kunkenmuller, Ray's South Yard Assembly Building at 75 Eastern Point Road, electric boat applicant. Dear Chairman Paul Kunkenmuller, Commissioners, thank you for referring this coastal site plan review received February 19, 2019 to us for review and comment. Project description. Electric boat is proposing to construct an over-the-water structure at its facility/campus at 75 Eastern Point Road. The overall site is 74.89 acres and is zoned industrial technology. The purpose of the building is to construct submarines for war-dependent use which cannot be located on the upland. The building is proposed to be 624 feet long and 317 feet wide, totaling 197,808 square feet and 160 feet high. A variance for height has been previously granted for this proposal, which is not correct for Mr. One and Pastor. The applicant is in the process of applying for required state deep permits. Coastal resources are significant on the site and include rocky shorefront, freshwater wetlands, coastal hazard area, developed shorelands, shellfish concentration areas, wildlife resources, and habitat, and submerged aquatic vegetation. Visual impacts. Given the size of the proposed building, visual impacts of the structure will be significant. The Commission may wish to require the applicant to design the building to reflect Groton's nautical history with architectural details. Conclusion. We hope that these comments are helpful to the Commission. Pursuant to Connecticut General Statute, Section 22A 110, we request that these comments be read into the record at a public hearing for this application. If we can be of any further assistance to you in this or any other coastal management or Long Island Sound related matter, please feel free to contact me. Signed sincerely, Carol Zamansky, Environmental Analyst.
Thank you. All right, so I'll turn it over to...
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. For the record, my name is John Casey. I'm a partner with the law firm of Robinson & Cole, and I have the privilege of representing Electric Boat Corporation tonight in their application regarding the evolution of their shipyard to meet the Navy's 21st century needs for our national security. As Dennis said, we're here tonight regarding a new assembly building and associated structures, improvement on EB's existing industrial site to support the construction of the new Columbia-class of submarines. Also, as Dennis mentioned, this is a functionally dependent use, a water-dependent use under your regulations. Excuse me. We, as you can imagine, and as Dennis alluded to, this isn't the start of the process. This is near the end of the process. There's been multiple regulatory approvals and applications, and I just want to give you a sense of where we stand as you consider this application. From the federal government, we've applied for approval from the Army Corps of Engineers. They have issued a public notice. We've gone through the public comment period that's expired, and we're about to file our responses to those comments. The state DEP, we are within days of achieving or obtaining our license. That process included a public comment period. There was no public comment period, no public comments concerning the application, and that includes all the development that you'll see in the presentation later today. Locally, we've been to the Harbor Management Commission as part of the DEEP process. It's been found to be compliant with the city's harbor management plan. We've been to your Shellfish Commission. They found there's no impacts on shellfish resources. We've also been to the Connecticut Bureau of Aquaculture, who determined the same thing. And again, that's all part of the DEP process before they make a determination. We've been to the Zoning Board of Appeals. We've obtained 3 variances from your flood hazard regulations, which will allow the building to be built over the water. We need a variance to do that. And we needed variances to lower the floor of the assembly building below the base flood elevation. And later in our presentation, we'll talk about compliance, how those variances work with the design of the building and how we otherwise comply with your flood hazard regulations. Lastly, we've been to the Conservation Commission in its role as your inland wetland agency, and we just recently gained an approval from them to impact some wetlands on site in connection with the development. So here we are before you now, one of the last stops on this long trip, and just to preview the application. It's for a special permit, but it's not a special permit in the typical way where you think of a special permit as a use that's not otherwise allowed in the zone unless you get a special permit. This use is specifically allowed in the zone. It's a manufacturing zone. It's a manufacturing use. Our special permits are for modifications to specific standards in your regulations. And those are to permit the height to be above 75 feet, to allow some of the wall-mounted lighting to be higher than 18 feet, and to allow modifications to the stormwater management requirements. And we'll provide more detail from this about all these from our experts when they testify in a short bit. So, as I said, it's not a typical special use permit like you think of, where the use isn't allowed, and you got to consider whether you're even going to allow it. So it's not a matter of the use being allowed; it's a matter of those modifications. We also are going to here to present our site plan for the entire site. That's required as part of the special permit process. Coastal site plan review, which because we're in the coastal zone, we require coastal site plan review. Just for your information, that was also part of the variance process from the zoning board. To get a variance, you also, in the coastal zone, you need a coastal site plan review. And the ZBA granted us coastal site plan approval as part of their process. Part of the deep process, really, it overlaps, because deep, when they decide to issue a permit, they have to look at all the same coastal management policies that are part of local coastal site plan review. So the only way we could have got to this, where we are with deep, is if they determined that we comply with all the Coastal Management Act policies. And as I said, that permit is in the end stages. It's just a matter of, I think, just getting it out the door, and we'll have that. Lastly, because we're in the floodplain, you have a floodplain development permit requirement, and as I said, we have variances, and we'll provide testimony regarding how we comply with your flood hazard regulations. So that's where we are, and I'm actually going to I want to go off my script for a minute, because Dennis read into the record a letter from Deep, and it sort of sets a tone here, and that letter was followed up by subsequent emails that are already in the record. But I think to give a full impression or full story to the commission and to the members of the public, I think it's important to read those into the record, because it leaves an impression regarding visual impacts, and we specifically asked Deep to sort of clarify that issue, and I don't want to start this off on the wrong foot. So I don't know, Dennis, if you're, or Mr. Chairman, if you would indulge me, or to have Dennis. I did. Is that not a exhibit?
Oh, actually, I didn't know if I was put fingers on it right away.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think you have to read your email to Michael, but you can. But Michael Grzwinski, who works at Deep, who's a permit analyst. But I think for clarification, it would be good to sort of.
I'll paraphrase mine if it's available, if anybody would like to do it. I had asked for more clarification as to what they meant by the visual impacts and how that applied here in review, especially in light of the permitting requirements of the applicant is going to do. That was as it related to the coastal site plan component. I did then elaborate, and for your benefit too, as you probably know, in our special permit criteria, we can't evaluate design. And we have, in our section 8 of our zoning regulations, we do have guidelines for architectural design. So that is something that falls separate from coastal site plan. It does fall under the site plan review. I did explain that in my letter to Heath. I will read Mr. Kuzinski's response. Good afternoon, Mr. Godier. Thank you for your email, which was received in response to a March 11th, 2019 letter from this division providing comments on the South Yard Assembly Building coastal site plan. In our letter, we noted that the proposed submarine assembly building will be a significant visual feature and suggested that the applicant, electric boat, design the proposed building with architectural elements reflecting Groton's nautical history. Your email states that the Groton Planning and Zoning Commission requested that electric boat explore further design options to reduce the visual impact associated with the proposed building and request further elaboration from DEEP regarding Connecticut Coastal Management Act considerations. We have found that the proposed activity is consistent with the policies of the Connecticut Coastal Management Act and will not result in significant impacts to coastal resources. The proposed building is in appropriate order dependent use. Sections of the general statute cited located in an existing development shorefront area of similar character. Again, further statutory sections referenced in that context does not degrade the visual quality of natural vistas and people. As always, please do not hesitate to contact me should you further questions. If you have further questions regarding this matter. Regards, Michael Kuzinski.
Okay.
Is that the communication?
That was the
you wanted to
communication,
introduce?
yeah. As I said, I didn't want this hearing to get off in sort of a certain feel to it because I think that sets the wrong stage. So with that, and I apologize to all my colleagues here, we'll get back into it. So as you can see, I'm not alone. There's a very large development team that is part of this effort and are with me here tonight. Starting from Electric Boat, the applicant, we have Maura Dunn, who's the Vice President of Organization and Facility Development, Paul Heron, the Facility Master Plan Program Manager, Margaret Peroulis, the Project Manager for South Yard Assembly Building, from Fuss & O'Neill, the permitting consultant and civil engineering firm, we have Kristen Soloway, we have Joseph Devine, and we have Stephanie White, who will each be speaking to you this evening. From Gilbane, the Program Manager, we have Al Hambridge and Karen Colby, who are here to answer questions if needed. They're not expected to make a presentation. From Jacobs Engineering Group, who is the design engineer, we have John Osaski, who is a senior project manager and will be speaking to you later. And then from AECom, the construction manager, we have Steve O'Connor, who is the senior project manager. I've left before you a package, which is our presentation that you'll see on the screen tonight. In that package, at the back, there are CVs or resumes for all of the speakers, so you can see their credentials. And with that, we'll start the process. What I've discussed with Dennis and with your attorney is, since we have so many speakers, we will let them speak. Our intention is we'll have them speak, and then we'll let the commission ask questions. Because if we just go and go and go, it could be many hours from now, and we thought you might have questions of each speaker as they're at the podium. So we just thought we'd pause, give you a second to ask questions or make comments, and we could take those in and respond to them if it's appropriate, or if not, come back to you at the end. And so also with that, it's not our intention to summarize everything tonight. We don't, rightfully or wrongfully, we anticipate that we'll have to come back. So when our last speaker is done, we would suggest that, Mr. Chair, you turn it over to public comment or comments from the commission at that time, especially if people are here and have been waiting a long time. So we can get their comments, as you said, and prepare our responses. So that's what we anticipate in terms of process.
Yeah, I would like to make sure we leave time for members of the public
Okay.
to comment tonight.
And if I could, go to the hearing won't close tonight because we're waiting for more information. We still need to do our review of what was just submitted on it today and in the last couple of days too.
Right.
Okay. Thank you. So with that, and with no further ado, I'll turn it over to Maura Dunn.
Thank you, John. My remarks will be very brief. I'm Maura Dunn, the Vice President of Organizational and Facility Development at Electric Boat. Paul and I will be talking to you tonight about how the submarine comes to be. My job is tonight very simple, and it's really to talk to you about why is this building so important and why is a timely decision necessary on this application. So first, we thank you on behalf of the 11,000 men and women who work for Electric Boat in Connecticut. I thank you. It's a big number and growing every day, I can tell you, as somebody who used to have the HR job before we decided I would just focus on facilities and organizational development. But that said, this is a very exciting time to be at Electric Boat and to be part of the efforts to build our nation's Columbia submarine program. As you may know, since many of you have been in the community for a long time, many years ago, back in the 70s and 80s, we delivered for the nation the Trident submarines, which actually are the bedrock of our nation's nuclear deterrence. At this point in our nation's fleet, the Columbia will be replacing the Trident class of submarines that have our nation's nuclear weapons on them, and the ships are rapidly reaching the point of no longer life extension. So we're at the point where we have, as a nation, the Navy's #1 priority is replacing of this Columbia submarine. This building, which you are considering our application for tonight, literally sits on the critical path of the building. And as this quote from the Vice Chief of Naval Operations shows you, it is the nation's #1 priority from the Navy's perspective, and they see this boat, I can assure you, because the Navy is in my office literally every other week talking to me about the importance of the building and the submarine program. This building has incredible amount of support and importance to our nation's defense because ultimately, without the application being approved, we do not have a location to build the submarine. This, in our opinion, is pretty critical to the nation's defense, but it also represents a unique opportunity for the city of Groton, because as you look at a little deeper into our application process and all the things we've said about the building in public meetings and the like, we are anticipating that we will need to continue to hire and grow our workforce, which represents a significant investment. The building itself is more than $600 million of investment right here directly in our community. And with that, I want to turn this over to Paul Heron, who works for me. Paul is our facilities management master plan project manager for Groton, and he's going to walk you through the submarine and why does the building need to be as high as it is. And with that, Paul.
Good evening. For the record, my name is Paul Harren, Harren, and I'm going to start off by explaining the products that we build. So this graphic shows a comparison between the current Virginia-class submarine that we build, which is the top boat on the left-hand side, 377 feet long. We are very shortly going to start construction of Block 5 of the Virginia-class, which is called the Virginia Payload Module. It adds about 85 feet to the length of the boat. Actually a little bit more according to this graphic, so it will be 471 feet, and that will continue to be built in the 260 building, the green building at the north end of our yard, and launched into Graving Dock 3. Concurrent to building that boat, we will be building the Columbia class, which is the bottom boat shown there. It's 562 feet long. A diameter of 43 feet, which makes it the largest submarine we've ever built. Our existing facilities are not capable of launching this vessel. The graphic on the right shows a comparison of the, looking from the bow at the two boats, so you can see the relative height there. And that's largely what's driving our need. A little more detail on the need for the height of this building. The graphic shows a section view of the building with two submarine representations of submarines in them. That's obviously not what the sail looks like for those who know anything about submarines. But we're just showing the elevation of the top of the sail is the top of that dashed line. And so that's the top of the sail. We have to do crane picks to load things into the sail, and those picks require a hook height of the crane of 110 feet above the floor. So when you raise the crane up to that elevation, the crane spans 227 feet or so, the 3 construction bays. And, so you could imagine the structure that's required to support that crane across that span. That determines the height of the crane. And then we have 26 inches of clearance between the top of the crane and the bottom of the roof truss. So this table is probably about 30 inches high. So, about 6 inches below the tabletop is, actually this table might be shorter. It might call it that height for the clearance between the top of the crane and the roof truss. So not a whole lot of clearance there. We've made an effort, as difficult as it may seem, to keep the building as small as we could. But that's what's driving the need for the height of this building. A little bit on the location. So, these lines are not, surveyed. They're just for discussion purposes. But the orange line is, the roads in front of our property, Thames Street and Eastern Point Road. The red lines are roughly our north and south property lines, and then the yellow line is the channel. So, our shipyard is, pretty well constrained in there. Bottom is north. Obviously, Long Island Sound is to the south. So just to, orient everybody, this is the 260 building where we build the Virginia class, Graving Dock 3, Graving Dock 2, Graving Dock 1, our south yard ways, and then this area here at the south end of our property is the south yard where we plan to build this building. Just a little more clarification, the industrial zone, the industrial technology zone encompasses EB, Buckeye Terminals, Pfizer. So this entire stretch of waterfront here is in the industrial technology zone. And we are somewhat constrained. We had looked at modifications to our north yard to be able to build the Columbia class at that end of our yard. Ultimately, it was deemed to be too risky technically. The plan was to take down this building, build an extension to the 260 building on the north, extend this deck out, and launch the Columbia into Graving Dock 3. Graving Dock 3 was sized for the Ohio class, and this boat being heavier than the Ohio was, the way we launch in Graving Dock 3 is we have essentially a captive barge within the dock that provides the buoyancy. We drive the boat out onto the pontoon from the land level, this deck here. We then super flood the dock, pump water into the dock so it's higher than the river level, and float that barge off. We call it a pontoon. We shift it to the side so that the arms that it sits on aren't lined up with the supports for it, and then we pump the dock down. Just did that a few weeks ago for the latest boat. And our issue with the Columbia class in this dock is that pontoon does not have sufficient buoyancy. We looked at ways of increasing the buoyancy, but geometrically you're constrained to the size of the graving dock that it's in. So the only option we had for increasing buoyancy was to make the pontoon deeper. The only way to make the pontoon deeper was to excavate the bottom of the dock, which is solid bedrock. And we looked at several different ways of doing that, and it was just determined that that was too risky to try and remove bedrock from the bottom of that graving dock. The risk to the structure of the pontoon supports that hold the pontoon up, the structure of the walls, and it wasn't technically feasible to do that launch in this facility. So the only other place we have in the yard where we have enough real estate to do it is at the south end of the yard. We looked at several options where we oriented the building, perpendicular to shore, at the north end, where we ended up here, and at the south end. And the only, due to the rock topography and the grading on land, the only option that was really feasible was the one that we're proposing, which is perpendicular to the South Yard Ways. So the South Yard Ways run east-west. We're proposing a building that runs north-south. And this is the layout of the building. So we have 2 assembly bays on the east side and the west side. So to the left is north. Again, our goal was to keep this building as small as possible. And part of what enabled us to do that was we can deliver modules by barge to both the north end of the building and the south end. That gives us, flexibility for maneuvering, large submarine sections into the building. If we only had access from the south end, which was one of the concepts we looked at, the building had to be 50 feet longer. So, this was, the smallest building that we could design that fits the boat. So we have 3 bays. We have an east bay and a west bay that will be used for, hull construction. Once the boat is complete, it will roll out to the south onto a floating dry dock for launch. And then in the center bay, we will do some module outfitting. And after that module is outfitted in the center bay, it will translate either east or west into the assembly bay to be joined with the rest of the boat. We're also showing mezzanines on the east side and west side that will support our construction trades, keep them close to the boat for improved efficiency. And then this is a section view of the building again, which shows those mezzanines. So we have 2 levels of enclosed mezzanine with lockers and ship management offices and people who work on the boat day in, day out. We have a boat access level, and then we have a utility level providing all the services that are required to build and test the boat. So that was an explanation of the building, why it is sized the way it is, and how we located it the way it is. One thing I should have noted was the elevation of the building. We got the variance to build below base flood elevation because we needed to match the elevation of this deck here. As I said, we have barges that transport the submarine sections, and those barges have to interface with both this facility and the new South Yard facility. So it was important to keep those decks at the same elevation, because if we raised the elevation, it would have made the barge bigger, the floating dry dock bigger, the submergence basin for the floating dry dock deeper. So again, it was an effort to minimize the size. Okay, so any questions on what I've presented so far as the need for the building?
Questions from commissioners so far?
I have one quick one. I noticed on the assembly building section where everything is labeled to the different areas, on the right-hand side you have equipment level, personnel access level, 2 trade levels, and a utility building. Is that the only access people will have to the building? Or will they be able to come in from the water side too?
So we have emergency egress doors, throughout the building to, meet the life safety requirements. All access to the building, personnel access, people walking in, is intended to be from doors located in the northeast corner and the southeast corner.
Oh, okay.
We have a series of doors. We have garage doors, 20-foot garage doors at the ends of each bay, as well as you can see in, oh, I don't have a picture. But each of these bays has a large, what's called mega door. It's a 90-foot high, 70-foot wide, double layer fabric door that, covers those openings. So,
Thank you.
sure. Anything else?
I guess just one point of clarification. So if you had to build the deck above base flood elevation, that would have actually increased the height of the building relative to Eastern Point Road and the surrounding area. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. Yes.
So by building below base flood, that actually reduced the
Right, and
the
we're
height of the building
the 2.5 feet or so that we are below
by
base
a
flood.
few
Yes.
feet anyway.
Do you have a graphic that shows, in the chairman's point though, it shows a cross-section from Eastern Point Road down through the building, so that we can get a relative, do you have that in your presentation at all? So that we can see.
For the record, John Casey, it's in the plans. I don't know if it made it into the.
No, we did not put it in the presentation this evening.
Maybe verbally, could you describe what the elevation is?
Sure.
in reference
So
to
the,
verbally?
in elevations relative to NAV D88, which is, kind of the standard elevation reference, except in our shipyard, the deck elevation is at 12.5 feet. Eastern Point Road is approximately 76, about 76, 75, 76. It varies, obviously, along, the property line, but I think on average it's about 75 or 76 feet. So we are, 65 feet or so, below, the deck is about 65 feet below the roadway, 62 feet.
But the building itself,
The building itself is approximately 160 feet tall, so yes, it sticks up, 7 stories or so above the road.
other questions or comments? Thank you.
Just,
Okay.
just quick, so we have it in the record, Paul, could you just clarify that this is, that the height above the 75 feet allowed in the regulation is needed for EV special manufacturing process?
Yes. So as I described in this figure, in order to do the construction of the ship, we need that height for the cranes to be able to load the ship, and we've so this is the minimum height that we were able to design the building to. So this is 100% purely required for manufacturing this ship.
Utilizing that drawing, could you with your marker just show how much will be above the Eastern Point Road level? Approximately.
I'm going to guess, but I'm going to say just about half. So, yeah, right about there.
Okay. Those work areas will also be technically underwater also?
No. So the base flood elevation is right about where the dot is there. It's 2.5 feet or so above the floor level. So all of these office spaces here are above mean flood. All of the utilities in the building, electrical utilities, mechanical, permanent mechanical equipment is all above base flood elevation. The utility building that is shown here is also elevated. If you see, the floor of this is above the floor of the assembly building, and that was to keep the equipment there above base flood also. So the only stuff that's below base flood is the floor. All permanent equipment that should be above base flood is. Okay.
Thank you.
Again, for the record, John, we do have John Osowski will present about the flood plain management permit. There is a graphic in there that shows those relative elevations. We have that in the slide deck, so you'll be able to see that shortly.
Okay, any other questions before I turn it over? Okay, so Kristen Soloway is now going to speak. This is slide.
Thank you. I was thinking of that. Good evening. For the record, my name is Kristen Soloway. I'm a registered professional engineer in the state of Connecticut. I'm a vice president with Fuss & O'Neill. Before I start, I wanted to enter into the record. I gave Dennis today the certified mailing receipts, but I'd like to also enter the addresses to which we sent them, a full list, as well as what was sent to the residents. I'm going to give you a little background on where we sit on the property description, a basic site plan overview, and I'm also going to talk about the coastal area resources. So this is a basic site plan layout. Oh, I went too far. As Paul stated, we're in the industrial technology zone. To the east is Eastern Point Road, north is to the left, south is to the right. This is the southern portion of Electric Boat. This is the Buckeye parking lot, and further south is the oil tank farm, and then on to Pfizer. This is the Thames River on the west. This is the main South Yard Assembly Building. There will be a receiving station that is on the eastern portion of the site. The plans you received originally showed this receiving station closer to the road. We've since been developing the plan further. We've brought it back further west. This will allow it to sit down and it won't be as high looking at the road, so some of the visual impacts will be reduced. We've relocated some of the equipment to be behind it, so it's a smaller footprint. So later on, during some of the renderings, you will see the newest layout of this receiving station. The construction access road will come in at the very south gate of the property. It will be a standalone roadway into the facility. It will be out of yard, so this will allow vehicles to come into the site, and they won't be idling out on Eastern Point Road. So it's to get everybody off as quickly as possible. And it comes along the railroad tracks and into the facility. There'll be some utilities besides power that will come off of Eastern Point Road. There'll be sanitary sewer, water, and gas. They're going to come through the site underground. They'll be off of existing lines within Eastern Point Road. We'll be applying for an encroachment permit from the Department of Transportation when that work is necessary. So as the property's in the industrial technology zone, by permitted use, what is allowed is the manufacturing of fabricating, assembling, or processing of goods and products. This is consistent with the existing functions of Electric Boat, and this building will continue those existing functions. The northern, just to mention, we don't see the northern property boundary here, but it is over 3,000 feet away. You can see it in that previous drawing that Paul presented. We are in the coastal area boundary. Electric Boat is about 920 feet away from the property boundary. So 1,000 feet is actually on the east side of Eastern Point Road, so we are well within that 1,000-foot coastal area boundary. As far as the industrial technology dimensional standards go, we meet all the setbacks for front yard, rear yard, side yard, lot coverage, all those dimensional standards. We are located in the flood protection zone. And this is the FEMA map. This shows that this is where the building is going to be located. And as we were discussing, the utility building is in between this blue and orange zone and the AE and the VE zone. As we said, we're 2.5 feet below the base flood elevation for the main building, but for the utility building, we are above it, 1 foot above the base flood elevation. We are not in the floodway. And that's pretty much for the site plan description. I'm going to talk about lighting as well. We are requesting lighting for the special permit. For lighting, what requires a special permit if you're above 18 feet in height. And if you want to be 18 feet in height for such as security or other reasons, it's allowed by special permit. So the lighting on the building will be via wall packs. There'll be minimal light poles within the site, just because there is a lot of vehicles traveling within the site, and it doesn't make sense to put pole-mounted lighting throughout the site, which is typical of the rest of the electric boat facility. There'll be a few light poles in this area, and those will all meet the city standard of an 18-foot light pole. The wall packs that will be on the building will either be 40 feet in height or they'll be 20 feet. The west side will have 20-foot wall packs. On the east side, there'll be 40-foot and 8-foot. And then on the north and south sides, they will all be 40 feet in height. They'll have cutoff, they'll be shielded, so the lights will not be visible from Eastern Point Road. The light fixture won't, the light itself, so they'll have a shield on there. So you won't be able to see them from Eastern Point Road. And the foot candles will actually be reduced to about 0.2, 180 feet from the building. So 180 feet is not that far away from the building. The lights are strictly to light up the area around the building, so that if vehicles or pedestrians and staff or employees are walking around the building, there is ample light. Just go through that. And just to, the property line is 337 feet away from the building. So we're pretty far away, as well as there's this, this whole site sits, as we've stated, about 65 feet below Eastern Point Road. So the lights will not be visible from Eastern Point Road. There will be no light trespass. So as I stated a little bit earlier, the coastal resources, there are several coastal resources that are impacted as discussed in our application. They're all impacted, they're under state jurisdiction. There is mitigation that is being proposed. We've been working with DEEP. There's 4 priority mitigation areas. They're all off-site, and 22 additional habitat restoration projects. They're throughout the state of Connecticut. There's several in Waterford. There's some outside of this project area in Groton. They go throughout the state. They are in our application, and we can go into those if there's any questions. The application materials contains their compliance with the Connecticut DEEP's Coastal Management Act policies. As John stated earlier, DEEP is ready to issue us our license. It just hasn't formally come through yet. It's been deemed that there's no adverse impacts as defined in the Coastal Management Act. And there's been some questions about how there's erosion and sediment control is going to be handled, the waterward side of the work. So as part of the license, DEEP has identified what erosion control measures they'd like to see put in place. So I just wanted to go through them for the record. They've requested that there be an oil boom or silt curtains during active construction of of in-water structures associated with the construction of the assembly building. They've asked for, prior to commencement of the work, authorized the licensee shall demarcate the area of existing eelgrass and provide a 25-foot buffer around the area. The licensee shall maintain the demarcation in optimal condition for the duration of the construction activities herein and shall avoid any work within this area. They've also required that they maintain and install and maintain a floating turbidity curtain around the work area, and they shall maintain all water quality improvements on the upland and shall maintain these improvements in optimal condition for the life of the project. They've also required that within 45 days prior to conducting any blasting, the licensee shall submit for the commissioner's review and written approval the final blasting plan. Such plan shall include, but not limited to, schedule for blasting, hours of blasting, the density, and provisions for requiring notification of deep inland wetland staff as well as fisheries in writing no later than 2 weeks prior to blasting.
So I'm sorry, Dennis, if those requirements been read, were they contained in one of the exhibits that you
I haven't
introduced
seen
into
them
the
yet.
record?
I have not seen them yet.
No, this is part of the license that we're receiving, that we've received yesterday. So the full, when we get the full actual license from DEEP, it will be submitted into the record.
So we should get that in part of the public hearing record once that's received.
You have to keep the hearing open.
Right.
The record open to get that in.
Get that in.
Okay. Does anyone have any questions for me?
So, yeah, I'm sorry for jumping the gun. Anybody,
Good.
I had said one question about the light level at Eastern Point Road. Is that, what is that gonna, I mean, you said it would be .2 foot candles?
Foot 2 candles at
180 feet.
180 feet. So there'll be no light trespass.
So we're zero at.
You're zero at Eastern Point Road.
Okay.
You're zero actually when you hit the rock wall, but
Okay, just for clarification, just wanted to make
Sure.
sure we had that. Yeah, I think that's all I had for what you're speaking about. Is there a section going to be, we're going to discuss utilities and those kind of things, or was that, you mentioned a few utility issues, is that the?
I can speak a little bit, or we can wait until,
If it's coming later, I'll just hold off.
Okay.
Okay.
This may not be your subject area, however, is there any consideration as far as the noise is concerned when we put in the cofferdam to build the facility over the water?
The noise, that would not be for me.
Okay.
That will be discussed further on down the
And
line
the
here.
other question would probably run
Is
around
it
the
more about noise, or is
The other
it?
question would be, you mentioned blasting, whether or not the neighborhood is going to be made aware of the blasting time.
Yes,
Okay.
they will be made aware. Absolutely.
All right.
And now I'm
Anything
going
else?
to turn it over, does anybody? Okay, to Joe
Thank you.
Devine.
Like this site plan. Good evening. For the record, my name is Joe Devine, D-E-V-I-N-E. I'm a professional engineer with Fuss & O'Neill, and I'm the civil engineer on this project. Now I'm going to talk to you a little bit about stormwater management, erosion controls, and utilities. This site plan I'll use to speak from because it's colorized and it's a little bit more easy to read than the other plans I have, but I will scan through the other plans. I'd like to start with stormwater management. The project includes a complete replacement of all the existing stormwater infrastructure. The existing drainage systems at the site convey both on-site and off-site stormwater. Off-site Oops. Off-site, we have an approximate 90-acre watershed to the east of Eastern Point Road that's draining through the site. There's some storm drains that cross Eastern Point Road and then dump down a rock cut face, about 50 feet of rock cut here to establish this level area, into a water channel that conveys the water to a head wall about here, and then it's piped to the Thames River from there. This existing water course and drainage pipe are undersized. As a result, we get some flooding periodically in this area of the site. So our design includes installing a low-level wall along this water course to increase its capacity and keep water from surcharging into the yard. We're also going to rebuild this head wall and install a new, larger storm pipe to resolve that flooding issue. That conveyance will be separate from the site stormwater. On site, we'll have a series of catch basins in these two relative areas that will capture all the runoff from the new paved areas. The runoff will be treated with a total of site-wide 5 hydrodynamic separators. Those separators will be sized to remove 80% of total suspended solids as well as oil and grease. Out here at the edge of the project where we get to the assembly building and these decks, most of those features are over the river. The decks themselves will have individual catch basins with individual treatment systems at each basin. They're designed also to remove 80% of the suspended solids plus oil and grease, but they will discharge through the deck directly to the river. They will not pass the water back to land. Along this western deck, we propose sheet flow directly to the river. There's going to be no industrial activity. That deck is essentially for emergency response only. And then the last impervious area we have here is the building itself. And again, those roof leader collectors will discharge directly below the building into the river. They will not pass the water back to land. The zoning regulations reference the Connecticut Stormwater Quality Manual. This manual has 3 pillars: pollution reduction, runoff reduction, and peak flow control. Any modification to those requirements has to be approved by special permit in the city of Groton. For pollution reduction, we request, as part of our special permit, to discharge the roof leaders from the assembly building directly to the Thames River without treatment. We're making this request because there are no sources of pollution on the roof. In addition, that flow will be sampled regularly as part of the stormwater management permit. So we'll be aware if there is any issues that arise. The other relief that we're asking for under the special permit is related to runoff reduction. Because we are increasing the impervious coverage at the site, we've seen a minimal increase in the amount or volume of runoff. So we are not actually reducing the volume of runoff. We're seeing a 2% increase. But given the setting along the river, we're asking, as part of the special permit, to allow a 2% increase in the total volume of runoff from this site. This is a technical problem for us to do detention at this site because most of this upland area has very shallow rock, as evidenced by this cut, just to form a level area. We're seeing rock at 2 feet below grade in some of these areas. It's only as you get right to the edge of the river, where historic filling occurred, that you actually have some soil above rock. But it's only occurring right along the edge of the river, and that's exactly where all the development is planned. So we have a technical difficulty with trying to detain the water to begin with, but we're only seeing a 2% increase, and given the environment and the setting of this, we're asking as part of the special permit that you allow a small increase in the volume of runoff as a result of this project. This is the less easy to read site plan. It's essentially the same thing that you just looked at. It shows the grading again. You can see some additional detail about these inlets. Again, these decks are level, and they're designed to allow equipment to be moved into the assembly building. We also have inlets on this deck. This sheet shows our erosion controls. Again, the zoning regulations require best management practices and compliance with the Connecticut guidelines for soil erosion and sediment control. We will install all of our E&S measures prior to beginning any development activities. We will inspect those measures throughout the project in accordance with the city requirements and the Connecticut Deep's construction stormwater permit. We propose to use the following measures for erosion control landward. First off, these little circles are representing inserts to each of the catch basins, either existing or proposed throughout the project. They'll be installed and maintained in existing and proposed basins until all the areas around them are stabilized. Along the edge of the river, you'll see this bold line here represents a double layer of erosion control measures consisting of silt fence with hay bales and/or turbidity stocks. We're calling for a double row along the edge of the river, and these systems are proposed because they're flexible enough to allow construction of the foundation. Again, there'll be a lot of work in these areas to put the foundation in for the building. And so these measures will have to be adjusted during construction. By using silt fence and turbidity stocks, we have greater flexibility in accommodating construction activities while being protective of the river. We show a stockpile area here. Again, this would be protected with a ring of silt fence and hay bales for our staging area. We're proposing construction entrances with crushed stone to prevent tracking of soil onto public streets. We also have in our plans details temporary sediment traps to be installed as needed, as determined as construction progresses. So we're not showing the basins. We're relying on this border treatment unless we decide that we need to convert, or we're asked by the city to convert and use a temporary sediment trap. And those would be sized based on the disturbance area that they need to serve. But again, building a sediment trap in this area is problematic for construction. So our proposal is to use the double row of movable barriers and only provide the sediment trap should it become apparent that it's needed based on the grading during construction. We're also showing some erosion control mats. Some areas where we're creating a level shelf for the receiving station. Some areas where we're cutting back some existing grades to allow for the construction road. Anywhere where we have a steep slope like that, we're going to use erosion control mats until those areas become stabilized with turf. Same up here on our construction road. We're protecting wetlands with a row of silt fence and hay bales. We have intermediate check dams due to the slope in this area. And we're protecting the cuts that are in excess of 2-to-1 or 3-to-1 with erosion control matting. All those measures are designed to prevent erosion and sedimentation during the cut for that construction road. So these measures would be protective of wetlands and the river while flexible enough to allow construction, as I said. They'll be installed, maintained, and reported as required under the Stormwater General Permit for construction activities. And the long-term solution for sediment control is the hydrodynamic separators that we're installing throughout the paved areas. I'm going to speak a little bit on this sheet with utilities. As the chairman asked to give a little more detail on the utilities, as I understand it. So we're running all utilities to the building. This is the assembly building, but this bump out here is our utility building that serves the assembly building. Okay, the finished floor of the utility building is base flood plus a foot. From Eastern Point Road, there's gas and water. They come down the hill, cut through the yard, and come into the utility building. That's where we get our fresh water and our gas. The receiving station that Kristen mentioned, that's where we're getting our power. That would come off overhead wires into the receiving station. That gets processed, and then underground conduit comes down into our utility boiler and into the utility building. For sanitary, we have a pump station off this corner of the building. All the flows from the assembly building will gravity flow or get pumped into our pump station. The pump station will lift those wastes to the north and up to Eastern Point Road. I don't have a slide with me, unfortunately, that shows that connection, but it's quite a bit to the north, where the sewers in Eastern Point Road are large enough to accommodate our flow. We've been working with Ray at Groton Utilities on those designs. Where are we connecting? What's the capacity of those utilities? It's an ongoing process, but we believe that he's in a place to accept the application. We have to go through some of the more details with him on the construction of that pump station and its connection to Eastern Point Road. But that's the sanitary waste, water, gas, and electric coming down this way. I don't know if that answers your questions about the utilities. But.
Well, we're on the right track.
Okay. So that concludes my portion of the presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions before moving on.
Questions or comments from commissioners?
Your runoff projections, are they based on a normal rainstorm or a 5-year storm, 10-year storm, or a 25-year storm?
We studied all of those storm events, all the way up to 100. And the volume increases that I mentioned was for a 100-year event. So it's a pretty significant event. We're designing our pipes and everything for a 25-year event, but we looked at the 100-year event.
Thank you.
So the 2% increase in runoff is for a 100-year event?
So
25.
Yeah, it was 100-year. The volume. We looked at the volume of runoff.
Right.
Okay, and so we get about 0.2 acre feet of additional volume under proposed conditions as a result of the development.
For a 100-year event, though?
And a 100-year event. So it's a 2% increase over existing conditions for a 100-year event.
Did you say that you examined a 100-year event, but based the size of the pipe off of the 25-year?
Yes, we typically design the conveyances. We evaluate what happens during a 100-year event, but we don't put infrastructure in the ground that's that big to convey, the 100-year event. We look to see what happens to make sure that we're protective, of the infrastructure. We look, overtopping events and where they would go. What's the hydraulic grade line during that event? But when we actually run our models to size our pipes, we use a 25-year event.
Any questions?
Mr. Chairman, I just want to mention, I was remiss to mention it before, but also with us tonight is John Schmitz, who's a professional engineer from DL Companies, and Michael Dion is a traffic engineer from DL Companies as well. They're assisting us, so if you have any questions for them too as well.
Well, I know they had a number of questions that they had raised. I think, but based on the original submission from Electric Boat. So, I presumably those will be addressed to their satisfaction before we move forward. And a lot of those had to do with ENS, the runoff, and those kind of things. So
They had a list of comments that the applicants have responded to and recently provided those responses to us, which they'll be reviewing.
Right, so they'll review the responses, and then
So
we'll settle that.
if I can add, we have the list of comments. We prepared written responses. We revised the plans. They just haven't gotten a chance to be reviewed yet. So I imagine by the next meeting, there'll be another round of comments on the comments, and we'll work towards a solution.
We can all come to agreement. Yeah, because one of my notes was to get the BL input on the runoff and the ENS sedimentation preparations. That I guess another question, concern I had about the utilities. So we talked about making sure that the existing sewer line can handle the increased volume, because that'll be, I think, very important in terms of the surrounding neighborhood, to make sure that the sewer line can
Critical
handle the
study,
volume.
yeah.
And also the electric power input and the potential impact on the surrounding neighborhood. It was a 35 kilovolt line coming in. Is it one or two? Because I remember hearing at some point that there was because you have to have a backup power source as well.
I wouldn't say you have to have that, but
I thought the Navy wanted it.
I'll let EB speak to that, but we can get this building up and running with a single circuit supply power, or as we've discussed with GU. They brought up a topic about, if you want redundant power. In other words, if we go down on that circuit, you're down. Is that a problem?
I thought it was a requirement of the Navy that you have to have redundant power. So that
I'll let Paul Herring speak to that.
So, yes, it is a requirement for protection of the ships, that are in the yard, that we have, redundant power supplies, which we satisfy with, redundant, sources of, power from GU, as well as, generators on site. But, it is a requirement for protection of the ship.
There's one 35 kilovolt line coming in to the utility receiving station. Is that? And that's overhead. I guess I just.
There's an
heard, too.
overhead line off there's overhead lines here, and there will be an overhead wire to two poles here, and then underground, a short run to the building, and underground here. Those are all tied off of a single circuit here.
Which is
I think the
existing.
redundant power could be from generators.
There are two feeds from current utilities.
And then those are